Hi, my name is Erica Jacobson, and I'm doing debate 3 and taking the stand that the U.S. was not correct to drop the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are many factors to consider in this issue, but I'm going to begin by talking about probably the most stated opinion regarding this discussion, which is that dropping the bomb was a military necessity, that there was no other way to get the Japanese to surrender. However, what most don't realize is that the Japanese position was hopeless long before the first atomic bomb was dropped. After the Japanese fleet was destroyed on October 1944, the U.S. was able to carry out uncontested firebombings on the cities of Tokyo and Osaka. Because of these events, Japan had lost control of both their air and navy. With this, the Japanese were poor in their resources and lost the ability to import food, oil, industrial supplies, which are all needed to carry out a major world war. Many also argue that the Japanese wasn't willing to come to some kind of agreement for surrender and were overall the unreasonable ones in this situation. However, regardless, um, General MacArthur actually was asked about the decision to drop the bomb, and he said on numerous occasions that the bomb was not necessary to end the war, and that the war might have been ended weeks earlier if the U.S. had agreed sooner to the retention of the institution of the emperor, um, which basically is referring to earlier negotiations with Japan. The resolution could have brought upon the U.S. If the U.S. allowed Japan's emperor to keep his reign, and this ended up being one of the main conflicts that prevented the Japanese from officially surrendering, which was partly due to the U.S. side of not letting the emperor keep his reign if the Japanese would surrender. Also, this wasn't the only attempt on the Japanese side to come to surrender. The Japanese had also approached the Russians for their help in brokering peace to end the war. At this point, the U.S. was well aware that these negotiations were underway, and the Japanese had been trying for months to find a way to surrender. Another thing that's not talked about a lot is that the ulterior motives behind the decision to drop the bomb. And I think once you understand that better, you can better understand that a lot about the decision had absolutely nothing to do with ending the war itself. A large point that has been made in the past that the U.S. used the dropping of the bombs in order to experiment the nuclear capabilities of their weapons. The U.S. wanted to see the level of destruction on one city by one weapon and used Japan as an experiment for the new weapon they had just built. Also, this was a way to dissuade the Soviet Union from dominating East Asia, which at that time I believe they had dominated parts of China, um, when Russia was going to declare war against Japan, the U.S. dropped the bomb 2 days before they were set to do so. Um, and something important to note is that the U.S. forces weren't at risk by waiting longer for a possible response for surrender from Japan. They did have to drop the bombs that soon. And also, since there was a land invasion on Japan scheduled to be 3 months away, um, but it was quite obvious that they felt the pressure from looming on them regarding Russia dominating East Asia. Overall, the bomb was used to keep the USSR in check, and even though this didn't fully prevent the US or the Soviets from developing nuclear weapons, it still managed to keep the peace between the US and the Soviet Union. Even if the US decided to drop the atomic bomb to force an immediate surrender, there were still numerous ways that they could have approached this that avoided um, the amount of casualties it did and the destruction caused by the bomb. For example, one theory is that they could have dropped the bomb over the Tokyo Bay water area, which was a wide open space that could display the U.S.'s power, and at the same time was next to where all the Japanese leaders and the emperor was. Dropping the bomb, was a very dangerous decision overall because it opened up the idea to the entire world really about the power and effect of nuclear weapons. The dropping of the bomb also likely heightened the stakes of the Cold War, and many believe that had the bomb not even been released, the nuclear arms race may have continued more slowly and without involving hydrogen bombs the way it did. Regardless of whether or not this decision was necessary to end the war, it was obviously extremely inhumane and really threatened the U.S.'s moral standing at that point in time with the rest of the world. The atomic bombs collectively killed about 200,000 people. Many of these people died from the initial blast, and many died due to burns. The mass destruction, caused a lot of fires. A lot of were obviously torn down. It pretty much took out all of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki as cities, and from the radiation poisoning that became deadly. Um, Many argue that the U.S. had the right to release the bombs because of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. And however, even though loss of life is something very serious, regardless of who it is, if you have to keep in mind that that in Japan's case, these weren't just soldiers on a military base. Most of these victims were innocent civilians, many including children and babies who didn't have the option to state their position towards their militaristic government at that time. Overall, I think that the U.S. had motives beyond what is talked about in their decision to drop the atomic bomb. Um, Many people that were on Truman's administration at the time have stated multiple times to other surveys regarding the atomic bomb that they believe that the Japanese were already losing the war at that point, and there was absolutely no reason to drop the bomb, and that it was for other reasons, as I've stated, um, to test out their weapons, to keep the USSR in line. Um, and overall, Japan was just in a hopeless position. It was already losing the war with or without an official surrender. So overall, those are all my points. Thanks for watching this debate, and I look forward to hearing other thoughts and opinions on this issue.